and global leaders to address Africa's pressing climate issues. The summit highlighted the need to mobilize climate finance, turn commitments into concrete actions, and enhance regional collaboration with an emphasis on innovative approaches and fair resource distribution. It emphasized the importance of joint efforts to strengthen resilience and advance sustainable development across Africa, laying a crucial groundwork for upcoming negotiations like COP30. In today's roundup, we'll review the key events from the second UN Climate Week. I'm your host, Gemechisa Mandida, and joining me are Desta Kahasai and Girma Mirgisa. Stay with us. Desta and Girma, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I just would like to begin with the major events that took place over the week. Of course, before I just talk about the second Climate Week of 2025, which is the Maulid celebration. And Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed conveyed a congratulatory message to all Muslims on the occasion of the 1,500th birthday anniversary of the Prophet Muhammad. And of course, he conveyed a wonderful message, which is, everyone, all of us need to learn, good lessons from the good deeds of these great leaders. Well, next, I just would like to go to the second Climate Week of 2025. As you know, it was held at the Addis International Convention Center in Addis Ababa from 1 to 6 September. And I just would like to ask you the discussions and the commitments from this UN Climate and the Africa Summit. What are expected as an outcome for future negotiations, of course, including the COP30? Desta.
And thank you. And I would like to say, as you have already opened up with Maulid celebration, I think many countries and religious followers can take some of the very good deeds and centuries-old Ethiopian heritages is the peaceful coexistence that trace this back to centuries. So I would like to add to that. And coming back to the second Climate Week is, I think we should start that it's been almost 10 years. It's been a decade since the declaration of the Paris Agreement, which was to be dispersed some amount of $1 billion annually for developing countries, in which Africa is one of the minimal contributor for the climate change, but is at the receiving end of the adverse impacts of climate change. Some of the very adverse impacts that Africa is facing are deadly flooding in countries like Nigeria, Chad, Libya, Kenya, Somalia, and this is causing devastating impact in loss of lives, displacement of millions, and destruction of infrastructure and livelihoods. So such of the things such as prolonged droughts and reduction of agricultural productivity and economic strain, mainly the major one is economic strain. African countries are forced to shift their budget to adapting climate change when they have to be implementing in other social sectors. So all this requires for the global action that Africa is looking for many years, that has been demanding. So the second Climate Week has been discussing on the ambitions and turning them into implementations. So far we've been listening to pledges and promises that has not been practically implemented on the ground. So technical experts from across the globe have been here in Addis for a week discussing on how to change these scenarios that has not been materialized on the ground. So one of the things that we have observed during this week is that everyone that has been part of this week's discussion was they have emphasized and stressed good enough amount of discussions in changing what has been over the past decades. So we look forward at least the scenario to be changed from pledges to implementations, I think. This is what we can see from the week-long discussions that has been.
Yeah, if you have anything to add, Girma.
Thank you so much, Gemachisa, for this opportunity. As Desta articulated that this, as you know, Addis Ababa is so busy this week due to large events. As you mentioned, this week Ethiopia has hosted United Nations Climate Week, and also we expected the second African Climate Week next week. So as it is, Addis Ababa is as a diplomatic center of Africa and home of Africa Union and other international organizations working still to organize or to host various events, particularly which focusing on regional, continental, and also global issues. As Desra mentioned that, as you know, the United Nations Climate Week held here in Addis Ababa, which focused particularly on impacts of climate change, how the globe should come together to address the impact of climate change. There is also a lot of commitments and also a lot of pledges to support particularly the developing countries which affected by climate impact recently. Desta has also mentioned that there is in 2015 Paris Agreement which adopted to support developing countries and also pledged billions of dollars to support African countries in order to mitigate the climate change. But still these agreements or these places not put on the ground to support these efforts. And also this climate week is focusing on such issues, how African countries can voice their stance, how can they working together in order to overcome the climate changes. And also there is a various agenda expected during this climate summit to be a major priority for African countries. These are among climate financing issues. One of the important issues discussing during this climate week is how African can get finance to mitigate climate support. There is also issues of just transition, which means Africa need to transit African economies toward green energy. Still, African countries are focusing on fuel oil, and also they need to transform their economy depend on by green development like renewable energy. Africa has really large amount of resource like as renewable energies, minerals, so on. So to transform such resource, Africa needs still high amount of from developed country, as Africa still contributing very least in climate for emission. But the continent which is affected more by climate effect. So this climate week is very important for Africa to unify their voice, to express solidarity, and also to come up with a strong or robust solution. Particularly, we are expecting the COP20, which is going to held in Brazil after 2 months. There's also G20 summit, and also we expected in September United Nations General Assembly. So this United Nations Climate Week is important to set a direction for such global events, and also what's the African position, what Africa need at this time in order to overcome the impact of the climate change. So this event is very important for Africa. As you know, there are various stakeholders has been participating on these events. There are climate negotiators. There are also private sectors. UN agencies representatives have been participating on these events. And it is important for Africa to unify their voice and to reflect their strong position, what they need at this time, particularly to overcome what they are facing in climate change. Particularly, we know Africa is the victim of the climate change, but Africa is also provide the solution to the world, particularly how to overcome the climate change. During the summit, various participants express their strong commitment, or they express optimistic how Africans are be have a strong solution and have an innovative idea to overcome the climate change. For example, when we take our Ethiopian Green Legacy initiatives, this is one of the Africa lead solution to overcome the climate impact in Africa. Still, other African countries are also working in their respective country how to overcome and also how to promote their Africa lead solution to the world in order to overcome the climate change. So this event is very important for Africa and also for the globe, as it is brought together people from across various corners. So this is a very crucial event, and also coming as critical times as the world is witnessing impact of climate change, particularly when we see there is floods, there's also high temperatures across the world. When you see currently across some European countries like Spain, Portuguese, and also in Italy, there is a fire, and so many challenges. This issue is not only for Africa particularly, but it is a global phenomenon that need cooperation, solidarity to overcome such impacts in the near future in order to bring a planet which is very prosperous and also attractive for the new generation, and also to live in safe for people across the globe.
Okay, Girma, Desta, let me come to you. At the official opening of this Climate Week 2, President Taye Askeselasi specified, of course, barriers to climate finance, and of course he suggested solutions. And what are these barriers exactly, and what solutions did he propose?
I think His Excellency President Ambassador Taye Askeselasi has mentioned some of the major barriers that the developing countries are facing with regard to mitigating climate impact and climate change. And one of the major things is bureaucratic obstacles in attaining or availing climate finance to developing countries. As I have been mentioning earlier, this is a very crucial thing. Africa is amongst the forefront in providing solutions to climate change. As Girma has been saying, Ethiopia has already planted about more than 40 billion seedlings over the last 7 years. This is a huge impact. It's a paramount importance for the global environmental protection, but nothing has so far been done by the pertinent organizations such as the United Nations Climate Change Office and others that are pertinent in addressing such kind of issues. So the President emphasized that there should be a very simplified way of availing climate finance for developing countries so that they can adapt climate change and mitigate the impacts when they are at the very receiving end of climate adverse impacts. And the other thing is that he mentioned that there should be a mobilized way of addressing in mobilizing the 1.5 trillion USD annually by 2030, which he emphasized mostly as a critical investment in the planet's future. I think our planet's future depends on this investment imperatively. So with this regard, I think the President has stressed that a simplified bureaucratic way and a very there should be, and the other thing he mentioned is that this should be the moment. As I have been saying, it's been a decade with no solutions except empty promises. But the President noted that this should be the moment to move from dialogues to delivery. So developing countries need to live with what they are saying and implement what they have promised and pledged and deliver for the community that is beneficial on the ground. This is what I take away, I think, from the President.
Good. The other significant figure that participated in this summit was, of course, chairperson of the African Union Commission, Muhammad Ali Yusuf, and he just highlighted the importance of fairness and partnership in climate finance for Africa. What does he mean by that, Guma?
Yes, you mentioned the African Union chairperson, Muhammad Ali Yusuf, stressed particularly the impact of climate, particularly in African countries. He stressed on issues of access to finance, particularly how to address this impact for African countries. He stressed this the time to have fair and equitable financing access to climate. Still, Africa is not get such fair and equitable finance to mitigate climate change. He underlines that the African countries' commitment within its own solution how to overcome such climate impacts on African countries. Yes, Africa is still a victim of climate change, but Africa has a robust solution and a capability to overcome in cooperation within the global community to overcome the climate change. So he stressed that African Union is committed to work with the international community, particularly within the developed countries, how can overcome the impact of the climate change. Particularly, he mentioned that Africa should have political willingness, and also Africa should come with a strong commitment and a strong ideas how international community understand the African need, what African need to overcome these climate impacts. Particularly, he mentioned to working with others international organization like a United Nations climate change, and also within others. Maybe I wanted to add on issues what Desta mentioned, particularly is our president stressed that Africa needs to have access to finance, which need more the outdates of international financial systems that need more reform in order to get enough amount of resource or finance for the climate change. And also he says that there is still debt impact on many African countries. They take some amount of money for their development. Still, African countries are struggling with debt impacts. So it needs to reform such international financial institution which suit for African interest, which fair and equitable for all global community, not only for some superpower or for developed country. Africa should play the crucial role. Africa should push for reform of such international financial institution or financial system in order to get money to support their efforts in climate mitigation. And also others figures or others participants on this summit stress is a time for Africa should play their crucial role, not only about dialogue. It needs action, it needs implementation, it needs what international commitment before should come on the ground to support African countries. For this, the chairperson stressed that African Union is ready to work within them and also to come with a solid solution and also be part of the solution, not only talking about the victim of such climate change. So it's stress on such issues. That's one of my comment.
Yeah, thank you, Guma. Desta, let me come to you again. Of course, African solution for African problem has always been, highlighted by leaders, by professionals, etc. And of course, innovative climate solutions from Africa has been highlighted in this summit. And we have Deputy Secretary, UN Climate, Nora Hamaji, said, a few things on this. And what are these exactly? And how do you think, they can inspire global action?
Yes, I think Nora's participation during this second climate week was very instrumental to echo what Africa is requiring from the global community in addressing the adverse impacts. And she has emphasized that climate crisis requires cooperation and solidarity. So the developed countries are required to come up and discuss with Africa and the likes that require the financing. But as you have already mentioned, the things that Africa is offering as a means of climate adaptation and solutions that has been implemented in Africa are amongst one are Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative that has so far planted billions of tree seedlings, and South Africa's Green Bonds and Kibera of Kenya. These are some of the things that are practically being implemented in Africa and are expected to bring about a remarkable change in adapting climate change and as a solution that Africa is offering. So Africa is facing some of the adverse impacts of climate change while contributing minimal and at the same time providing the solutions. So this requires a huge amount of finance for Africa. When we are initiating such kind of solutions at home, the international community, the least they can do is support us through finance. So I think the UN Climate Change Deputy Executive Secretary Noura Hamadi has stressed good enough about what should be done in supporting such kind of initiatives that are being implemented in Africa. So Africa is not causing any, if I can say, any climate change impacts, but is providing the solutions. So I think the leaders and experts that has been part of the second climate week have already pledged and called for the international community to support Africa's remarkable solutions that has been put forward. I think that
Desta, but what you have said, of course, has to do with my next question. And of course, Ethiopia's Minister of Planning and Development, Dr. Fitum Asafa, called for bold and practical climate actions. What does she mean by that?
Yes, actually, the Planning and Development Minister, Fitum Asafa, has noted that this is a time to just come up with a bold decisions. We should come out of pledges and empathy promises. And she already explained that the climate change is not in a distant future. It's here with us. It is at the present moment we are facing it. We are living it. So there is no need to procrastinate time. We cannot say, let this stay for tomorrow. So a bold decision from the heads of states and from governments and the international organizations and the international communities is needed so that developing countries cannot continue on delving in all these impacts. And the other thing she mentioned also is that I think Africa is being part of this cooperation. Ethiopia as a front runner in climate change adaptation for far too long. It has displayed with all the experiences it has been doing. So a bold decision from the international community is a very critical thing to be done at this very right moment, I think.
Yeah, Girma, this second climate week of 2025, which took place over the week, is of course a preparation for the upcoming Africa Climate Summit 2025. Yeah? And what are the objectives of Africa Climate Summit 2025?
Thank you so much. Following this United Nations Climate Week, we going to participate, or Addis Ababa going to host the second African Climate Summit. The first Climate Summit took place in Nairobi, Kenya, 2023, which has come up with various declaration, particularly how can scale up financing climate impact, particularly for African countries. The main objective of this summit is how African countries came together to unify their voice, particularly to reflect their position on the impact of the climate change, particularly in Africa. So this is like a Pan-Africanism Summit, which brought together African leaders to discuss their concerns and also how they will come up with strong or robust ideas or declaration to the international community, particularly for the developing country, and also what the matters for African countries, what African country needs at these times, despite the impact of the climate change. So this summit will focus on discussing the previous pledges on commitments and also how that commitment is ongoing, what need to further push that commitment to put on the ground to support Ethiopian African efforts in overcoming the climate impacts. Particularly, these summits will focus on some key issues like as financing climate financing climate mechanism, how African can take or can need finance from concerning bodies or from others partners like us, maybe international banks or other private sectors. How can they support African countries? It also focuses on how Africa can work together to have their innovative solution to overcome this climate change. Yes, African countries have many experience in their own countries how to overcome the climate changes, and also how they also mobilize domestic resources. For example, when it takes the Green Legacy Initiative, Ethiopia internally play a crucial role in order to fight against climate change by planting billions of trees, which is very important lesson for other African countries, particularly to mobilize internal resources. It also may focus on technology and knowledge transfer among African countries. You know, Africa is pushing for equitable access to green technologies and the partnerships that support local innovation. It also focuses on creating or come up with ideas for upcoming events. You mentioned later, like us on upcoming COP30 and also on G20, as well as on United Nations General Assembly. What Africa should do, what Africa need in cooperation to reflect or to come up with their unified voice to get support or to get some working within others international cooperation. So this Pan-African Forum will focusing on African issues and what Africa is doing at these recent times, and also how maybe they overcome these challenges. It needs political willingness, it needs cooperation, it needs solidarity, or it needs working hand in hand with other stakeholders like us, United Nations, climate change, and other entities. So this summit is very important, and it's come at critical time, and also it maybe will come with more good news than maybe the first climate summit held in Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah, Desta, can you add the contribution of this summit to foster regional and international cooperation?
Yes, as I have already mentioned, the climate change or the climate crisis requires cooperation and solidarity among each and everyone across the globe, because our planet requires our effort so that we can live in a very livable environment. So with this regard, I think the upcoming COP30 in Brazil is very critical for Africa, so that they can at least come up with a unified voice, what they are requiring from the international community. As President Taye Assequa-Selassie has already mentioned, in simplifying some of the barriers, the obstacles with regard to availing climate finance for developing countries has to be simplified. When they are providing solutions like the Kibera of Kenya, Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative, and so on, they have to be encouraged and be given a very simplified way of the bureaucratic hassles that are being in place with regard to availing international climate finance for this. And the other thing I can say is that I think as African Union Chairperson Ali Yusuf has already mentioned, Africa requires climate finance which is equitable. In some parts of the world, some are getting climate finance, while Africa is not getting enough equitable with that when we are providing the solutions. And the other thing is we need a technology transfer which is efficient with regard to climate adaptation. And the other one is capacity building. So all these things are needed in the upcoming COP30. And I think even for that, the second climate summit, which will be held in Addis next week, will be a very stepping stone to come up with a very solidified stand of as an Africa.
Yeah, well, I just come to my final question regarding the takeaway from this summit, especially for important stakeholders such as leaders and stakeholders, especially with regard to declarations that could be, issued. What do you say on this?
I think one of the very primary thing is that we should move on from dialogues and to delivery. This is one thing, because it's been years with empty promises. And the other thing is availing finance, which can support developing countries like Africa to come up with mechanisms that can support their budgetary, because they are diverting their budgets, which should have been used for other social sectors. They are putting it in climate adaptation and mitigation. So finance is another thing, and the other thing I can expect from this is a unified voice with Africa, where they can require the international community's support. And the other one maybe probably, I think the global international communities can say this is enough with promises.
Yeah, Girma, briefly.
Okay, thank you so much. Just this is a very serious and milestone summit, so we expected that maybe Addis Ababa declaration will be expected after the end of this summit. So it's also an important summit. There is also a side events here in Addis Ababa as various stakeholders from all the globes come together. So we expected that there may be established some strong African climate negotiator who pushing African interest at a global arena like us, G20 or United Nations and so on and so on. So this also very important, not only at international level, as Ethiopia is hosting this critical, very important summit, Ethiopia can also use such summit to promote efforts. As you know, Ethiopia has been undertaking various concrete in mitigating climate change. So this is very important for Ethiopia to showcase commitment despite hosting such international or such very large and important summit. So I think it's also expected to come up with a strong voice, what's the African positions on the climate impacts, particularly how they get the commitments, the pledge before some international events. So it's the time for Africa to get some resources, some finance in order to overcome what they are facing currently as a continent. Maybe I think it's wider.
Desta and Girma, thank you very much. I think we need to wrap our program right here due to time. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Viewers, Thank you very much for attending to our program. And the second Climate Week of 2025 edition ends right here. And next time we'll come up with a new one. And until then, goodbye.